Hi everyone, and thank you so much for watching my channel, The Witty Turtle. In the last class, we have already understood all the basic concepts of life cycle costing, which is there in your paper number 15, Strategic Cost Management, CMA Final. So today we are going to start with the theory portion, which is there in the study material provided by ICMA, right? So in the last class, I already told you what is the meaning of life cycle costing. So the very same thing today we are going to study here. Life cycle costing aims at what? Ascertainment of cost of a particular product or project over its entire life or over its projected life, right? In the last class also I told you the same thing. This definition also I have discussed in the last class, that life cycle costing is a system which tracks and accumulates the actual cost and revenues which can be attributable to the particular cost object, which is the product in this case, right from its inception to its abandonment, starting से लेके end तक, right? And life cycle costing is also known as cradle to grave costing and womb to tomb costing. Cradle to grave का क्या मतलब होता है? Cradle means when a baby is born and उसको जिस swing पे सुलाया जाता है, where the baby is put to sleep, that swing is known as cradle. And grave क्या होता है? Grave, all of us already know that after death, where generally the dead bodies are being buried, that is known as grave. So cradle to grave and womb to tomb. Now coming to meaning of product life cycle. So it is a pattern of expenditure, sale level, revenue and profit over the period from new idea generation to the deletion of product from product range. New idea generation and deletion of product, right? During this particular period, you have to record the pattern of expenditure. There are 4 elements: expenditure, sale level, revenue and profit. Very simple. What is your expenditure? कि आपका cost कितना लग रहा है? Sale level क्या होता है? आपका quantity कितना sell हो रहा है? And what is revenue? Your sale amount is known as your revenue. And lastly, your profit, right? So these 4 things are being calculated. The next point says product life cycle spans the time from initial R&D on a product to when customer servicing and support is no longer offered to the product. So in the last class only I have told you that what is the meaning of abandonment. Abandonment is that particular phase where no support or no after sales service is provided to the customer on that particular product, right? So here product life cycle duration is defined. It starts from research and development till the point where no support or service is needed to the customer, right? And here only it is given that for motor vehicles, the time span may range from 5 to 7 years. And for pharmaceutical companies, the time span may be 7 to 10 years. Now coming to characteristics of PLCC. What is PLCC? Product Life Cycle Costing, right? So इसका जो पहला characteristic है वो ये है that it involves tracing of cost and revenue, right? Tracing of cost, 1, 2. Cost and revenue of each product over several calendar periods throughout their entire life cycle. उनके entire life cycle में what amount of cost they are incurring and how much revenue they are earning, you have to trace that. That is known as your PLCC. Now the second point says it also traces research, design and development cost and total magnitude of these costs for each individual product, and it is compared with product revenue, right? So total how much product revenue is being generated, and that particular revenue is being compared with research and development cost, and the total magnitude of this cost for each product is compared. And the third point says it assists report generation for cost and revenues. Obviously it is a basic characteristic. Now coming to how many phases are there in product life cycle. So when I was doing my BBA, we had a paper called marketing management. It was there also, this concept was there also. So there are generally 4 phases in a product life cycle. The first one is introduction. What is introduction? when that particular product is introduced in the market. Next is growth. Growth is that phase where people generally get to know that particular product, and the sale is very high. Like the amount of sale increases at an increasing rate in this particular phase. Next is maturity. What is the meaning of maturity? Maturity is that particular phase where the sale increases but increases at a decreasing rate. राइट पहले जितना सेल बढ़ रहा था उतना नहीं बढ़ता है, बट वो धीरे धीरे बढ़ रहा होता है. एंड लास्ट फेज इज डिक्लाइन. डिक्लाइन का मतलब होता है वो पॉइंट जहाँ पे वो प्रोडक्ट मार्केट से खत्म ही हो जाता है. उस प्रोडक्ट को लेके ज्यादा यू डोंट हैव टू इनकर मच कॉस्ट ऑन दैट पर्टिकुलर प्रोडक्ट. दैट इज नोन एज योर डिक्लाइन फेज. So in this chart, everything is given about the four phases, right? And all these 5 points we will start understanding now. The first aspect is sales volume. What about sales volume in all the 4 cases? So in the initial stage where the product is freshly introduced in the market, so the sales volume is generally low. Why? Because there is not much awareness about the product in the market. So the sales level is generally low. In the growth phase, what happens? The sales level increases at an increasing rate, right? You can find a rise in sales level at increasing rates. In maturity level, what happens? Maturity phase, you can notice a rise in the sales level but at a decreasing rate. Okay? And lastly, in the decline phase, what happens? Sales level off and then start decreasing, right? As you can see this particular graph, so this is your sale. In the introduction phase, what happens? Generally the sale is quite low. Then in the growth phase, what happens? It increases at an increasing rate, right? You can see there is a steep, यहाँ पे बहुत ही steep increasing हो रहा है. But in the maturity level, what happens? You can see there is an increase, but this increasing is not very rapid like this phase, right? So this is your maturity. And lastly, it starts declining. So this phase is what? This phase is declining phase. Your next aspect is prices of products. So what happens to the price? Initially, like in the introduction phase, what happens? The company has to incur very high cost because the company has to do all the promotional events. So the prices are very high just to recover the initial cost. राइट प्राइसेस हाई रखेंगे सो दैट जो इनिशियल कॉस्ट है वो जल्दी रिकवर हो जाए. नेक्स्ट इन द ग्रोथ फेज व्हाट हैपेंस? द हाई प्राइस इज स्टिल रिटेन्ड, राइट? व्हाई? बिकॉज इन द ग्रोथ फेज the prices are at high levels in order to realize maximum profits. See how they generally make maximum profit in growth phase, because we already learned that in growth phase the sales increase at an increasing level. So बहुत ज़्यादा sale होता है. So when there is sales at a very large quantity, so what happens? If you keep high prices, then you can realize maximum profit in this particular phase. In the maturity, what happens? Because many players come into the market and the competition increases, so the price generally starts falling and the price falls closer to the cost. Cost के साथ जो आपका selling price होता है वो generally equal हो जाता है, almost equal हो जाता है. Margin जो होता है आपका, your profit margin becomes very less in this maturity phase. And lastly, your decline phase, what happens here? The gap between price and cost is further reduced. So यहाँ पे cost and price का जितना difference था, that even further reduces in the last declining phase. Now coming to the third aspect, that is ratio of promotion expenses to sale. This means how much promotional expenses you are making to reach to a certain amount of sales. That ratio. For example, to get a sales of 10 crores, you are making a marketing expense of 2 crores. That ratio, 2:10. That we are talking about here. So that is the highest in the introduction level. Why? Because generally the product is newly launched in the market, and distribution to the customer and also creating an awareness amongst the customer is very important. So promotional expense is the highest in introduction level. In the growth level, what happens? total expenses remain the same while the ratio of selling and distribution overheads to sales it is reduced due to increase in sales. The total expenses that remains the same in growth phase also, right? Why? Because in growth phase your sales is still increasing, so you have to maintain the amount of marketing spent. But as the sales also increases, so the ratio between promotional expense and sale decreases, which is a good thing obviously. In the maturity level what happens? Ratio reaches a normal level of sale, and ये जो normal level of sale होता है, this generally becomes the industry standard. What is the meaning of industry standard? When you are in a particular industry, for example in automobile sector, they have to maintain a certain amount of promotional expense, a certain percentage of promotional expense, which is okay for all the companies which belong to the automobile industry, right? That is known as your industry standard. Now, the next is what? Reduced sales promotional efforts as the product is no longer in demand. Reduced sales promotional efforts as the product is no longer in demand, because in decline phase what happens? The amount of sales starts decreasing. So the product, जो product होता है उसका demand reduce होने लगता है. So obviously promotional efforts are also no longer needed. The fourth aspect is competition. So competition क्या है यहाँ पे? It is negligible and insignificant in the introduction phase. Why? Because generally no new player is there in the market at this particular level, right? And in the growth what happens? When other companies notice a certain amount of rise in sales in this phase of that particular product, so जो बाकी companies होते हैं वो भी अपने product line में ये product को launch करना start कर देते हैं. So what happens? A large number of competitors start coming to the market. So competition increases, and the increase in competition is at its peak in the maturity level, right? Peak competition सबसे maximum होता है आपकी maturity level में. And in decline phase what happens? All the competitors they start disappearing due to withdrawal of the products. Generally जब धीरे धीरे आपका प्रोडक्ट लाइन से वो प्रोडक्ट विड्रॉ होने लगता है, तो वैसे ही वैसे जो कंपेटिटर्स होते हैं दे स्टार्ट डिसअपियरिंग. एंड लास्ट एस्पेक्ट इज व्हाट? प्रॉफिट्स. इन द इंट्रोडक्शन फेज what happens? Obviously the profit is nil, and in some cases it is in minus also. Like generally the new startups they make heavy losses, which is known as your burn, monthly burn, annual burn. ये सब term तो आपने सुना ही होगा. So they are generally very less. Why? Because they have to like their initial cash outflow is very heavy initial cost, so profit is nil. In the growth phase what happens? The profit increases at a rapid pace. Why? Because obviously the sales amount increases at an increasing rate. So obviously generally जैसे ही sales volume बढ़ता जाता है और cost धीरे धीरे recover होता जाता है, so the profits start to increase at a rapid pace. In maturity phase what happens? Normal rate of profits since costs and prices are normalized. तो इस फेज में क्या हो जाता है ना, एक इंडस्ट्री स्टैंडर्ड सेट हो जाता है हर चीज के लिए. कॉस्ट भी आपका नॉर्मलाइज हो जाता है और साथ ही साथ आपका जो अमाउंट ऑफ सेल्स होता है वो भी एक स्टैंडर्डाइज होने लगता है. सो इस वजह से क्या होता है? इस वजह से जो आपका रेट ऑफ प्रॉफिट होता है वो भी नॉर्मलाइज्ड हो जाता है. In the decline phase what happens? The profits to decline as there are many new competitive products who play on their prices, right? So generally the profits also start to decline. And इसको ऐसे भी याद रखा जा सकता है. Here we learned that gap between price and cost is further reduced, right? So selling price and cost के बीच में there is no certain gap, so obviously the profit will decrease, right? Now this point says that price reduction will not be undertaken. So this means the price of the product will not be reduced until these three things happen. The first is what? The low prices will lead to market penetration. Obviously जैसे Jio ने किया था. When Jio came into market, what Jio did? Jio swiped up all the other competitors by playing at the price. Jio provided Jio provided the Jio SIMs at a very less and a very nominal price. So that is known as market penetration. कि आप ऐसे मार्केट में आओ कि बाकी जितने प्लेयर्स होंगे सबको आप धो डालो, right? And what is the second point? The firm has sufficient production capacity to absorb the increased sales volume. Obviously, if your sales volume is increasing, so and your price and you have sufficient production capacity, so you don't need to reduce the price, obviously. And lastly, what? If the competitors are not entering the market, then you don't have to reduce the price. But अगर आपके competitors market में आ रहे हैं बहुत ज़्यादा amount में, तो क्या हो जाता है? आपका जो price है that you have to lower down. So I hope you have understood the product life cycle graph and everything about PLCC. In the next class onwards, we will start with benefits of PLCC and importance of PLCC. If you find this video helpful, then please hit the bell icon and subscribe to my channel, The Witty Turtle. Like the video and also share this video with your CA and CMA final friends.